Today, I'm doing that annual ritual of completing my 8 hour CEs, and I'm in the middle of it right now. In fact, I'm on my lunch break, which gives me an opportunity to talk about the topic of the day, which is the amount of wealth that baby boomers have in housing and what it all means and what the opportunity is for us. So I came across, I was reading Ben Carlson's A Wealth of Common Sense newsletter this morning. And in it, he had 20 questions, just random questions he asked himself and answered. And one of the questions was, gosh, what happened? What's going to happen to all this baby boomer wealth in real estate? And here are the numbers. And the numbers are somewhat staggering, right? And here's the deal. Baby boomers own roughly just a little under $20 trillion in U.S. real estate. That equals about 41% of the country's total real estate value, about 41%. But they're only 20% of the population. So they have this outsized wealth in real estate. And by comparisons, millennials own less than $10 trillion in real estate, even though they have the same population density as boomers. So millennials are the same population size. They own half the wealth that boomers does. It makes sense because boomers have owned their houses longer. But here's what's interesting. It's not interesting that boomers have accumulated wealth through real estate because they've owned the real estate for a long time. The house has appreciated. What's interesting is what's going to happen to that wealth. And look at it in this perspective. I think it was the analysis of the census data by Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies predicts that roughly 15.6 million people or households or boomers are going to decline by about 15 million households in the next 10 years. That's a decline of about 23%. So about 23% of the boomers are going to age out in the next decade. But what's even more interesting, the following decade, the 2035 to 2045%, another 40% of the boomers are going to age out. So all told, in the next 20 years, nearly 40 million boomer households are going to have to transfer one way or another. 40 million boomer households. And so the question I have is, what are we doing about that? It seems to me that clearly shows a problem or a need, that's something that needs a solution. We get paid for we get paid for solutions, and the better solutions we offer, the more we get paid. And so what's our role in this, and how can we help this wealth transfer? Let me give you a couple other thoughts, because I read this morning, and it made me reflect upon Bill Perkins' book, Die with Zero. And if you follow me, I reviewed this book probably 6 or 7 months ago. But there's a couple of really interesting things in the book that help us or give us a framework on how to think about this wealth transfer. Here's the first one. The average age of inheritance in the United States is 61 years old. The average age that people inherit is 61 years old. And you want to know something? In his book, Bill Perkins argues that's way too late to have a meaningful change. It's way too late, right? And because the greatest impact of a gift or inheritance or wealth transfer happens when people are in their 30s, not their 60s, right? Because the earlier you transfer wealth, the more time you allow it to compound. And wealth, by the way, compound with more experiences, more life, and more investments. And in the book, Bill goes on to say, think of this. A single mother in her 30s that has 1 or 2 kids is struggling to house their family. They're struggling to get an apartment. They're struggling just to make ends meet. But 30 years later, then those kids are grown, and that same person has gone through life, and their earnings have slightly increased, and they figured out how to house themselves and hopefully their family. And so they've solved it by the time they're 60. But that's when the wealth comes to them. And at that time, they don't really need it. They don't really need it. But if the parents would have gifted that wealth to them, or part of that wealth to them in her 30s, and let's say they would have gifted $100,000 in her 30s, right? And so she could have bought a $300,000 house that would have been affordable, right? That would have meant everything to that person at that time. And then the magic in that is that then $100,000 gets to compound annually, and it compounds leverage, right? So in the example we're giving, $300,000 house, let's just say it appreciates annually at 4%. Well, they have that 44% annual compounding for 30 years, and that $100,000 is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, meaning it's more meaningful, it's bigger. So not only did it give the recipient a much better life experience, and it gave them, housing sustainability, right? But it also really generated more wealth for the person receiving it versus if that $100,000 is sat on the sidelines for 30 years. And so in every way, Bill Perkins argues, look, there are a lot of things you have to transfer that wealth sooner. Well, we can be instruments of helping people understand this. We can be, I don't care if you're a real estate agent or loan officer, we can help all these boomers that have massive amount of assets. We can help them realize the sooner they can give it to their kids, the better. And we can help them create ways that they can control the gifting so that it doesn't get, so it doesn't get lost in a divorce. We can help them do it we can connect them with tax professionals to minimize the tax implications, but to help their children start growing wealth today. And with a huge affordability crisis, people need their parents to help. People need their grandparents to help. We need to educate these people, the grandparents and parents. Don't wait until you die. Instead, do it when it can be most advantageous to the recipient. And so I just think it's there's a problem, we have the opportunity to solve the problem. And in solving that problem, we generate all sorts of opportunities for ourselves. And I really think we need to lean into that. If you think 40 million households are going to change hands one way or the other in the next 20 years, with half of them in the next 10 years, are you out there proactively reaching out to seniors, telling them about the wealth transfer? Are you creating, wealth transfer workshops with CPAs and estate planners and really crafting a wonderful solution for these folks? Because if you do, you might really find yourself in a very sweet spot of opportunity. That's my message today. I appreciate you guys giving me a little bit of your time. I have to get back to my dang CE class, and boy, is it exciting. But I hope you're having a great day. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks.